When we talk about form and meaning, we're talking about two completely different things, but they're really intertwined. So it's important to understand what we're looking at. Meaning is why we're doing something. It's the why of a message. But form is the how. It's more what we can observe, what we see, what we hear, what we're feeling is the form. But the meaning is the underlying piece. So it's the why. For example, all humans need clothing. It's one of our basic needs. So why do we need clothing? Well, the why might be a little different in different cultures. In our North American culture, it's about modesty. We have clothing because we're covering our bodies. But the form of clothing is a little different in every culture. We can all think about cultures that have very different standards for clothing. Think about tribal cultures or indigenous cultures and the different outfits that they wear. Some of them in the jungle in Peru where I used to live, some of them had a tunic type of a thing, but some of them had what you would think of as a typical indigenous, just covering up your private parts. In Spain, they only sell the bottoms of your bathing suit. That doesn't work in my culture, but that works in Spain. So the form of clothing takes on very different meanings, right? So the way people dress is different in different cultures. But think about church culture. Let's go to our church culture. Pastors. How does your pastor dress? Some pastors dress very casually, so they may wear jeans and a t-shirt on stage or jeans and a polo. But then in other cultures I've been in, or in other churches in the United States, because different churches have different cultures, the form takes on a little bit different flavor. So pastor shows up in a full suit and tie. Is it any different? His whole idea behind having clothing is to meet a basic need, but the form was different in different cultures and different situations. While we're talking about church, let's talk about other church forms. So, communion. What are the forms? What's the correct form for taking communion? Does your church go up to the front and everyone take off of a common loaf and drink out of a common cup? Is that better or worse than passing the bread on a plate and passing the little cups? Or is that better or worse than the wafers? I don't know that it changes anything. It does for some people. It changes it a lot in their mind. But what is the meaning of communion? See, it shouldn't change. The form shouldn't change how we feel about communion because it's still an act of taking the Last Supper with Jesus. And if the meaning stays intact, the form should not matter. But it matters a lot. Form is the thing that causes the most division. Form is the thing that people argue about. So, prayer. What should prayer look like? Should I close my eyes to pray? Can I sit to pray? Do I have to stand to pray? Can I raise my hands to pray? Wait, do I have to? Maybe I need to hold my hands out to pray. What if I get on my knees to pray? Or if I lay on my stomach on the floor to pray? Do I need to go to the altar to pray? Do I need to hold my face to pray? All of those are forms, but what is the meaning? See, prayer is the bottom line. Prayer is the meaning. The meaning is communion with God. The meaning is having that intimate conversation and connection. And so, does it matter what the form looks like if the meaning is being accomplished? And this becomes a big thing when we go cross-culturally because my forms from home may not make any sense in my new cultural context or where I'm visiting. So I don't want to take my forms wrapped up in my culture and impose them on the place that I'm going where it doesn't make any sense. I've known families to have, I know a family that has been completely separated over whether they should pray before a meal or after a meal. Because one part of the family thinks prayer before the meal is the way it has to happen. And one part of the family thinks that you need to pray after the meal because that's more in line with Jewish custom and that would be more correct. In the end, they're both praying for the meal and giving thanks. But that it has become a major form of division in their family, this form of when to pray. Also coming into the form and meaning conversation comes literal words or literal translations. So my sister-in-law is from Bali. In Bali, the viper or the snake is a sign of paradise. Wait a minute, what happens when you're reading the Bible and you get to the verse that says you're such a brood of vipers or a generation of vipers? What just happened to the meaning? If in the Balinese mind, viper means paradise, and the biblical translation was you are a generation of vipers, we messed up the meaning. The meaning no longer is condescending or angry or a punishment. It's now a, wow, whatever you did was awesome. You're going to paradise. And so translating and making sure that we're in the right context with the right words is very important. What about actions when it comes to Bible? Does it have to be the literal action when we're teaching or when we're sharing a story? There's the verse about, and he beat his breast, and it means that he was so sad and so distraught that he beat his breast. Well, in some African cultures, that's a sign of pride. You did it great. You beat your breast with pride when you were finished. So if we're sharing a story and we're sharing this concept, and then we say, and he beat his breast, we just confused the communication and confused the situation because we're trying to say, he was so sad, he was so distraught that he beat his breast. But what they're hearing is, he did such a great thing, such pride he has that he beat his breast. Another church example of form and meaning is baptism. Baptism has a meaning that we all agree on, but the form causes lots of division. Does it have to be full immersion? Does it have to be at a certain age? Does it have to be by sprinkling? Does it have to be water from the Jordan River? What are the forms and what are the meanings? And we need to make sure that we're not crossing that line and saying the form is more important than the meaning. Because if we say it has to be full immersion, what are we saying to a great portion of the world that doesn't have enough water to do full immersion anything? We have friends who were workers in an African country, a sub-Saharan African country, no water. So they could not do full immersion baptisms. They were doing baptisms, they were doing sprinkling baptisms, but not full immersion. One of their supporting churches back home dropped them. It was their biggest supporting church, and so they refused to support them unless they would do full immersion baptisms. And even though the workers tried to explain, there's no water in our country, there's no water, people are dying, there's a drought, animals are dying, we cannot take the only water available and tell people that's the only way to come to Jesus. And so that's one of those instances where the form became more important than the meaning. It's so much more important to get the meaning right and let the form be cultural. Let the form be what works for the people that you're going to.